Well, to give us further insight on the unfolding tensions over Ukraine, we're now joined by journalist and political analyst Fred Weir, who's joining us from the Russian capital, Moscow. We also have historian, political analyst, and author Marcus Papadopoulos, who's joining us from London. Gentlemen, welcome to the program. Let's start off with Mr. Weir. Give us your initial thoughts on the recent comments made by the Russian President Vladimir Putin in this regard.
Well, it's pretty clear that the diplomatic path is finished now. If you remember, it's been like over 2 months, almost 3 months that it's been going on. There was a process. It was very hopeful. It was managed from the top, and there are clear deals that struck that wouldn't have involved pain, neutralization of Ukraine, a reorienting of it so that it opens to east and west, and perhaps extending that to other post-Soviet countries. That was something that probably could have been negotiated, but the Russians are absolutely adamant. You can blame them as much as you like, but they will not tolerate a Ukraine that's drifting into the NATO orbit, becoming a de facto NATO military power, and eventually solidifying Ukraine as part of that bloc, which Russia regards, with some reasons, as hostile. So Putin has gone to his plan B. And therefore, all the negotiating tools, bilateral with the Americans and NATO, or implementing the Minsk II accords within Ukraine, which would have federalized Ukraine and therefore satisfied Russia's demands, all that is off. And now I think Russia still into those two republics. They're clearly going to. We come into contact with the army, and we'll just have to wait and see.
Marcus Papadopoulos in London, give us your thoughts on the fallout up until this point. The United States has decided to impose new sanctions on Russia as Moscow is ordering troops into the two breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk in eastern Ukraine. Where do you think that this situation is headed at this vantage point?
Well, ever since the American engineered coup in Kiev in February of 2014, which saw Ukraine enter America's sphere of influence, Russia has been preparing itself for the most stringent American sanctions that the world has ever seen. So Russia has not been idle in the last 8 years. It has taken numerous steps, numerous precautions to safeguard the Russian economy against American sanctions. And what we see unfolding now is in no way the fault of Russia, because one of the reasons as to why Russia has amassed its forces along the Russian-Ukrainian border was to try and obtain political concessions from Washington, specifically security guarantees, in that America would put into writing that Ukraine would never become a member of NATO, and that America would comply with the NATO-Russia Founding Act of 1997 and withdraw NATO forces from Eastern Europe. But alas, the Americans were not interested in finding a diplomatic solution to the Ukraine crisis. They are not interested at all in relinquishing their foothold in Ukraine, because they want very much Ukraine to become a member of NATO, which would see Russia completely enclosed on its western border. So Russia had to act, and Russia has acted, and has acted clinically. But also at the same time, Russia didn't have any alternative. Why? Because a great many people in the Donetsk People's Republic and the Lugansk People's Republic hold Russian citizenship. And the constitution of the Russian Federation states that a Russian citizen falls under the protection of the Russian armed forces. So Vladimir Putin had no option but to recognize the DPR and also the LPR. And we also have to acknowledge that there is an atrocious disinformation campaign being peddled about Ukraine regarding Ukraine. And that is something that a great many ordinary people in both America and Britain are completely oblivious to, because they are of the impression that Russia is an alien country in Ukraine, which of course is anything but the truth.
All right, stay with us, gentlemen, as we're going to take a look at some online reactions to the events surrounding Ukraine. Elijah McNear wrote, encouraged by the U.S., Ukraine is expected to escalate and cut diplomatic relations with Russia. Not that it affects Moscow, but it shows how the West is pushing the tension to another level. Europe is not doing enough to de-escalate. UN Human Rights has written at this critical juncture, any significant escalation in military action heightens risk of serious human rights violations. All sides must cease hostilities, prevent civilian casualties, and pave the way for dialogue, not further violence. Ravinder Singh Vora says ultimately it's only economical agenda of Russia, European countries, and the United States of America in terms of control of gas-producing fields of Ukraine. And Terry Bennett wrote, Ukraine elected a government in 2014 which was brought down by the U.S. The CIA, the U.S. only is interested to destroy Nord Stream 2. They've installed neo-Nazis and heavily armed them to attack the people of Donbass. Russia invited in to protect the people of Donbass. Look it up. Marcus Papadopoulos, one of the reactions there, said that Europe is not doing enough to de-escalate. What can you tell us about the role of Europe here?
Well, regrettably, the European Union is not an independent player in world affairs. It is a strategic ally to the United States of America. And as a consequence of that, Washington exerts tremendous influence in the European Union. And I believe that Germany's suspension of the Nord Stream 2 project demonstrates my point exceedingly well. Because whilst, yes, Nord Stream 2 would have been a significant source of revenue for the Russian Federation, at the same time, Nord Stream 2 would have been highly significant for German industry and highly significant for German domestic households. So it's not so much a matter of Germany having cancelled Nord Stream 2 or having suspended Nord Stream 2. It is more a case that America, through its influence in Berlin, was able to ensure that Germany went ahead in suspending Nord Stream 2. So we shouldn't expect anything from the European Union. We shouldn't expect anything different from countries such as Germany and France. It is deeply regrettable. At the same time, we should know this, that in Berlin and in Paris, there are very senior officials, political officials and business officials, who do not support the EU stance on Russia. They do not support how the EU is going hand in hand with America and NATO against Russia. Why? Because the Germans and the French have very, very lucrative business interests with Russia. They have very lucrative investments in Russia. They want to export to Russia. And of course, the European Union's stance, the European Union's new package of sanctions against Russia is going to jeopardize trade ties and investment ties between Russia and France and Russia and Germany. So in short, we should not be surprised by the position which the European Union has adopted concerning the Ukraine crisis.
Fred Weir, is the United States, is one of its main objectives in this whole saga to destroy and hamper the Nord Stream 2 project?
Well, yes, definitely. I think that that's a no-brainer. The United States doesn't have much trade with Russia. You see, this is the big difference. It has very, very little commerce with Russia. They import oil, titanium, a few strategic things, but not very much. And so therefore the United States can go the full sanction route without feeling or expecting to feel any pain itself. And in fact, if because of banking strictures or pipeline closures, the gas got cut off to Europe, the United States made it very clear that they can step in and sell LNG to Europe to take up the slack in that market. Now, I think it's rather doubtful whether there is enough gas for that, but I'm sure that calculation is the unspoken part of a lot of the radical American enthusiasm for more sanctions on Russia.
All right, thanks a lot, gentlemen. Journalist and political analyst Fred Weir joining us from the Russian capital, Moscow. And thanks to historian, political analyst, and author Marcus Papadopoulos speaking to us from the British capital, London.